Hi guys, welcome to Snakes and Adders. Today's a bit of a milestone. It's episode 50 of our Introducing series. To mark this, I've got my handsome nephew Ashley here with me, who's been helping us bits and pieces in the shop. And he's done some really good work with some of the snakes that we've had for calming them down. And I'm going to hand the snakes over to him once we start, and he can try and keep up with them because they're boisterous and they're going to go everywhere whilst I'm now trying to explain all this stuff to you. So, welcome to episode 50. We are going to be looking at these, the northern pine snake, Pituophis melanoleucus melanoleucus. Quite possibly one of my favourite snakes, and this is for a number of reasons. This snake has a personality, potential mood changes, a great appetite, and as you can see is beautiful in its own right. This is a large and strong colubrid from the southeastern United States. In exceptional cases, the snake may pass 7 feet in length and have considerable mass. The average is more likely to be a well-built 5.5 to 6.5 feet in length. Snakes from the genus Pituophis are often maligned as grumpy or aggressive, which you can see by these two is just patently not true. Adventurous and all over the place quite possibly, but aggressive not so much. And northern pine snakes are no different in this reputation, and for a long time they've had to fight against this name about being aggressive and basically just a pain to work with, which they're just not. They're fabulous, and honestly you'll just see their quirky, inquisitive personality throughout this video, and there's nothing to be scared of or even worried about at all. Northern pines are defensive and vocal with it, but generally that's it. The likelihood of a bite is incredibly low, and this is nearly always bluff. And northern pine snakes are the masters of the bluff, trying to make themselves sound big and hard when actually they're pussycats and really quite laid back. Once out and in the hand, invariably they calm down perfectly well. But would you believe me, when these animals first came in and we initially had racked them just while we were inspecting them for a couple of days, make sure they were okay, when we went to handle them, they were really noisy, shouting at us, letting us know. But within maybe a minute of being out and being held, oh, you're just holding me, it's okay. But they were scared and nervous, and it's understandable. Perseverance here is the key, and not allowing them to put you off with their vocal distaste for disturbance. Part of the problem, you see, is Pituophis snakes have evolved with a filament in their throat, which is a very rudimentary form of epiglottis like we've got in humans, and would essentially could even be viewed as the precursor to vocal cords. And what this does is it means that they can bellow loudly and with a huge amount of ferocity in their hiss. So for a snake that's so relatively diminutive, they can make a lot of noise, and this can be off-putting. And this is true for the whole of Pituophis, who have the capability to make that kind of sound, whether it's a bull snake or a gopher snake. So along with this habit of bellowing and the rattling of their tail, this serves as a warning to would-be predators to leave them alone, but also to warn big dozy cloven-hoofed neighbours that live in the same areas as them, whether that be deer, sheep, goats, or bigger things like your cows and on the farmlands, to tell them, don't stand on me, I'm over here, which is precisely why a rattlesnake developed its rattle. The bull snake would probably be a more applicable example of that, because it's a plains animal. This is more of a forest animal. As you heard from the Latin name at the beginning of the video, the word melanoleucus is repeated. This means that there are subspecies of the northern pine snake, and a repeat of a species name means that this is the nominate form or the type subspecies. The other subspecies is the southern or Florida pine snake, Pituophis melanoleucus melanoleucus, and the black pine snake, Pituophis melanoleucus ledingi. Is he going up your sleeve?
Yeah, he just got first on. For no reason.
On the map we can see how they're distributed. So if I turn round and tell you what I'll do is I'll transfer Mrs. Woman over to Ashley as well. He can have fun trying to contain both of them, which should be hilarious. And this just makes it easier because I've got the notes and I can talk at a greater speed. I'm not worrying about what she's doing. So this is the distribution map of Pituophis melanoleucus, the species, and then we've got 3 subspecies here. So down to the south we have Pituophis melanoleucus melanoleucus, which is the Florida pine, and to the west we have Pituophis melanoleucus ledingi, which is the black pine. This northern section here, which is the main populace, is Pituophis melanoleucus melanoleucus, the northern pine snake. So then we've also got, main population occurs from southern North Carolina through South Carolina, through the northern half of Georgia into eastern Alabama. Northern pine snakes, interestingly, also have separate locales which probably show a natural shrinkage of their original distribution, and populations have effectively become marooned. And these include regions in New Jersey, Western Virginia and Eastern West Virginia. Eastern West Virginia, yeah, I got it right. Kentucky and 2 regions of Tennessee. Northern pine snakes have this wide range, but many keepers associate them chiefly with New Jersey's pine barrens. These tend to be very cleanly marked with an off-white cream background and colours that are very dark, almost black on their saddles. And these would be classic pine barren looking pine snakes. Where are we? Northern pine snakes will then integrate along the border where they meet the Florida pine snake, Pituophis melanoleucus mugitus. The Louisiana pine snake is sometimes associated with this group, Pituophis rutheni, but authors suggest that this is what they call an allopatric species. This means it occurs alongside the black pine snake but seemingly does not naturally integrate, which is interesting. As a result, they put them in a clade with the rest of the Pituophis genus, and they occupy central and western United States and Mexico. Whether I agree with this and I'm convinced by that, I'm not sure, but what do I know? But certainly from looking at Louisiana pines, they have a lot more in common visually with the 3 subspecies we're talking about, rather than with the Catenifers, which are the gopher snakes, and Depii, which are the northern Mexican and Mexican pines. Where are we? So can I ask you to just step to one side? So I'll do this. So Pituophis literally means pine snake, taken from the Greek words pitis, which means pine, ophis, which means snake. And then the species name, melanoleucus, melano black, leucus white, black and white pine snake. So, in fact, pine snakes, northern pine snakes, Pituophis melanoleucus, are the type species for the entire genus of Pituophis. So, if they were going to describe just in one snake what a typical Pituophis would look like, the northern pine. So that's the gaffer, not the bull snake, not the gopher snake. And, you know, they all belong to Pituophis, which means they're all pine snakes, according to the translation of their genus name. Northern pine snakes were first described in 1803 by Dowdin. This makes them a pretty old snake. Okay, so not quite as old as a corn snake described in 1766, but as you'll probably agree, 217 years of described history is a pretty long time to have been around. It's previously been allocated to 4 genus: Pituophis repeatedly, Coluber, which is more associated with the races nowadays, but back in the day when they were first describing snakes, Coluber was just a generic Latin term for snake, Churchillia, which is an interesting word, and Rhinechis. Now the final one is interesting because this was used for a time for the European ladder snake, which was Rhinechis scalaris, and there are a number of features on a ladder snake that are highly reminiscent of the pines, including that enlarged rostral scale. So where are we now? Pine snakes occur predominantly in, you guessed it, yes you guessed it, pine forest. They are most commonly associated with upland regions from 0 to 500 feet in elevation. They are most associated with longleaf pine forest, and these regions are described as xeric, which means hot and dry, which the climate data for the region seems to argue against, but we'll get to that later. The soil should be well drained and heavily sand based. The land will be pretty much level in aspect and friable, easily crumbled. Pine snakes are adept diggers capable of excavating surprisingly long tunnels of up to 8 to 10 feet in length. Females will dig a tunnel for egg laying with a chamber at the far end, and multiple females may share this egg laying site. The tunnel leads down at a shallow angle and then raises before the egg chamber itself. Females are known to return to the same nesting sites each year, but will usually dig new nests. You can come back in there. There you go. Now he's adventuring everywhere. That's it, come down here, you terror. Hey, never mind nothing. Where are we? So females are known to return to the same nesting sites each year, but will usually dig new nests. In winter, they will pick a different site, usually with more leaf and vegetation cover for the insulating properties that they possess. These burrowing processes are greatly aided by a specialised rostral scale. Just one tiny step, there we go. This specialised rostral scale is a huge, specialised, reinforced, robust scale on the end of the snake's nose. So let's see if we can get that in shot. This reinforced oversized scale makes a useful digging tool. In the soft sandy soils, it makes expedient work of the digging process. The rest of the upper trunk of the snake is heavily keeled and rough to the touch, and this too will aid in scooping and scraping the substrate from the burrow. Pine snakes are capable of fossorial, so underground, terrestrial, ground dwelling, and arboreal, tree climbing tendencies, but it's generally accepted that this is a relatively secretive snake that spends a lot of time in its burrow. This has actually led to scientists thinking there was a far smaller population present than was actually true, because so many were hidden away. After a winter brumation period, breeding commences with eggs deposited in summer. Eggs are large and yields are therefore relatively small. Clutches of under 10 eggs are the norm. The large, robust babies can easily consume fuzzy mice, and larger hatchlings may even be capable of taking crawler or small adult mice. In captivity, pine snakes may be restless, and this can lead to a chapped appearance on the rostral scale. Where's he? Because he's got a bit of a... Come on, son, let's have you. So you can see that slight pinking of his rostral scale, and that's because he's been up at the glass rubbing a bit. And it can maybe look slightly sore or chapped, and that's actually quite normal for Pituophis. They're incredibly active and they look round a lot and they investigate glass barriers and things. So it's something to keep an eye on. And on occasion, you just might want to treat it with a bit of iodine. In some instances, it may look split or even sore, and it's imperative that a choice of hides and caves, preferably dark, with a tight entrance, are provided. Old school keepers came up with this wicked dual level design, and one keeper who still uses them to this day, incidentally, is also a renowned Pituophis species breeder called Al Stotton. And if you just take another step that way, Ash, and then this is just a rough design, just I did it on Word, where you've got a standard, what looks like a standard classic viv at the top, and then what looks like a little Mario tunnel, like that, bloop, 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 down there. And what we've got is like a cat litter tray or a feeding under tray that will slide into this section. And this is, we want it to be opaque so that we can't see in. And this is going to allow the snakes to enter into that naturalistic burrowing process and may help to curb that restless, rubbing, burrowing activity that the snakes are entering into, which can cause their nose to become so sore. Let's have a look. Where are we? So many notes, man. I'm trying to keep up with them all. So this excellent simulated subterranean section of the vivarium allows the snakes to indulge in naturalistic burrowing behaviours. This seems to reduce the restlessness seen in classic vivarium designs. Some keepers will still opt for the classic design, but many will provide multiple hiding opportunities and apparatus to try and keep the snakes busy and engaged. I can come back in now, love. This is a large snake, and as an adult, a minimum vivarium of 48 by 24 by 24 should be provided. There is a movement to offer more generous enclosure sizes, and many would think that a 72 by 24 by 24 or 6 by 2 by 2 vivarium would be much more suitable. Owing to the size of the enclosure and the fact that UV degrades over distance, a 6% Pro T5 kit should be mounted at the warm end alongside a 250 watt ceramic heater paired to a rated bracket fitting and enclosed within a cage. This should be paired to a day-night thermostat that controls the temperature, such as the day-night digital unit on the market from Habitat, which also has an ancillary plug for us to plug the T5 kit into, and we can control photo period. Are you trying to make an escape? Yeah. Oh, did you hear that? There you go. That's him huffing and puffing. Nothing to worry about. They're funny, the way that they huff and puff. They're great. So it's got an ancillary plug where you can plug the UV light in as well, and that'll act as a relay, turn it on and off, and you can control their day cycle. The basking temperatures should be controlled by the stat during the warm period of the year to between 29 and 31 degrees Celsius, and this can degrade to around 24-25 degrees Celsius at night. Climbing apparatus should be positioned towards the cool end of the vivarium. We're going to be setting a basking area directly beneath our heater, and that slab or log needs to be the hottest place in the tank. If branches and plants and apparatus go closer to the heater than the basking area, then the basking area is no longer the basking area. The piece of apparatus that's closer to the heater is now the basking area. Hope that makes sense. If a multi-level vivarium is used, there is the potential to heat the lower subterranean region with a heat pad coupled to a thermostat running at, say, 25 Celsius, and this could be manipulated to be warmer for gestating females that are carrying eggs. And this can run at night, and then on a separate dimmer stat you could have a halogen spot, which is what more advancing keepers tend to recommend, which can go on during the day, but that's now a 2-stat 2-plug system, and it's starting to rack up in price. I've got no problem with you doing it, but personally I would just be using a ceramic with the day-night stat by Habistat and the UV light clicking on and off on a 12-hour cycle. Pine snakes are avid feeders with very fast metabolisms, for mammal feeders anyway, and it's not uncommon for them to defecate 48 to 72 hours after a meal. Owing to the speed of digestion, this can be a somewhat messy affair and will be far looser in consistency than waste from boas or pythons. Hi, you're back again. We will feed the snake weekly as a youngster and begin to slow down at around 18 months of age to every 10 days and every 3 years to every 14 days. This is in an effort to avoid obesity, which is entirely possible with this species. Pine snakes may shun very large meals, much preferring multiple, more modestly sized meals. They may also accept appropriate sized birds, and they will also accept birds' eggs. They have what's called hypophyses in their neck, which are spikes on the interior of the vertebrae that aid in cracking the eggs, and this spills the contents into the throat. Remember that looser, more moisture-rich prey, such as eggs and chicks, may well end up in the snake redecorating its enclosure in a really rather disgusting way, with projectile diarrhea. Sexual maturity is around 3 years of age, although it can be advantageous to allow another season, particularly for females, to add that little bit of maturity. Seasoning animals is helpful and will be required more than it would have been with Mugitus or Lodingi, because we're going so far further north, and we'll look at the climate data later to see how we cool down and how we warm up. So seasoning animals will help. This will involve cooling them down considerably for a period of around 3 months. A fairly consistent temperature of between 8 and 10 Celsius would replicate the cool season in much of their range. Some keepers find that only a gentle cool down is required, but this could put fertility at risk. Male sperm count is heavily dependent on how cool he manages to go down in winter. Yeah, can you have him back? You're ruining me smoothness with me nuts. Are you getting all clambersome? Tell you what, pop them back in the viv and then we're okay then. So I've lost where I am. That disturbed me. There you go. Sexual maturity is at around 3 years of age, although it can be advantageous to allow another season, particularly for females. So you may find pine snakes particularly tested after this period of cooling down. Very testy, very angry, short-tempered, and that vocal behaviour may well return. Don't worry, remember 90% of the time this is bluff and will abate very quickly once out of the enclosure. Heavy feeding should recommence for the female. Ideally, we'd like her to go through a shed cycle before we begin introductions. Gestation, pregnancy, takes 60 to 70 days, and 4 to 10 eggs are laid in an egg chamber. These would be transferred to an incubator and incubated at between 28 and 29 degrees Celsius for a period of around 60 days. Vermiculite should be mixed 4 parts to 1 with water by volume, and baby pine snakes are rarely, if ever, problematic feeders and establish easy, owing to their much larger size than other colubrids from the same area, such as rat snakes of genus Pituophis and king snakes of genus Lampropeltis. If handled regularly from an early age, this can help greatly in reducing the potential defensive behaviours we discussed earlier. So now we're going to turn and look at the climate data and look at what that tells us about the life cycle of a northern pine. So we took 10 separate regions across the Pituophis melanoleucus range. So we've got Birmingham, Alabama, Roanoke, Alabama, Dalton, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina, Brevard, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, Lakewood, New Jersey, and Wildwood, New Jersey. So there's quite a cross section there. And what this does is, in this top chart, we're charting the daytime highs. And, you know, there's a bit of drift. We've got a maximum summer peak in Roanoke, Alabama of 34 degrees Celsius, whereas Wildwood and New Jersey, we're topping out at around 28 degrees Celsius. So there's about 6-degree drift, you know, like a bandwidth between hottest and coldest region. And then nighttime low looks like a similar spread, if not slightly wider, with summer nighttime lows of, say, 23 degrees Celsius, and that would be in Birmingham and Roanoke again. So Alabama being the warmest state that this occurs in. And then the coolest states would be your where are we now? Orange. So Brevard, North Carolina, and maybe Dalton, Georgia in second place. And these are around 16 to 18 degrees Celsius. That's your midsummer nighttime low, remember. What we can see here is this is our frost line. That's where it's starting to freeze. And there's 3 localities that consistently fall below freezing, with Lakewood, New Jersey hitting -5 in February as their average nighttime low. So to say that this animal would need a brumation period is an understatement. So what we've got here is the averages across all 10 of the regions, and this shows our arc and fall as we would expect. And these black capped sections here represent the arbitrary 10 degrees Celsius line, which is around the sort of lower limit of where the snakes can be active. And you know, they might come out and bask periodically, but there's no way they're hunting. And the basking opportunities will be short-lived. The weather could be very inclement, etc. And that runs from, on average, it goes from October through to April. Now, obviously, depending on which locality we're actually looking at or talking about, it could well be considerably shorter than that, and it might only run from, say, November to February. Because most of the northern pines are so commonly associated with New Jersey, which is considerably further north up here, and it's coastal with those winds and weather fronts coming in, it does run slightly cooler. If I was going to pick a region that I wanted to try and mimic for the purposes of reproduction of a northern pine, it would be New Jersey's. That's my personal take on it. They don't come from the northern half of New Jersey, they only come from the southern lowlands. They don't quite reach the coast, so they're inland from places like Atlantic City, but they're basically the lowland pine barrens, and yes, that's their specialist region, and those xeric forests that we're talking about. Rainfall seems relatively steady. I've not done a graph, there wasn't a whole heap to see, no real pattern. The consistency of rain stays throughout, with averages from, well, we've got 46, 45, 47, 40, 41, 60, 65, 59, 42, 31, 35 and 45, like as the average rainfall throughout the year. So there is a wet season a bit, which is going to be June, July. The dry season is October, November, December, and there's not a whole heap to describe there. So rain and humidity isn't going to play a massive role in the reproductive cycle of the northern pine, or at least I wouldn't use it as a factor. I'd be more interested in these daytime highs, nighttime lows, and potentially the photo period. So I would, in winter, as we're starting to get to these cooler periods and we're cooling them down, we also start to modulate how much light they have, and this can help as triggers to encourage them to go down. We want to get them to 8 or 10 degrees. That's not necessarily easy in a normal house. You might have to use an outhouse, and you may even want to think about using a fridge, and where it's just clicked to say number 1, and it might run at 6 or 7 degrees. Might be just slightly cooler than we would want, but it would be the best way for us to be able to maintain a relatively steady temperature, if not an unheated utility room, as long as it was frost free. As long as it was frost free, would be safe as well. But these snakes do remain active at surprisingly low temperatures, so make sure the box is secure. I speak from experience, as we had, well, I say we, me and an ex-girlfriend's brother had a pair of northern pine snakes that we wanted to breed, Bonnie and Clyde, and we put them into the garage at my old house, my mum and dad's old house, and we didn't make account for the boiler warming up that region of the room, and it must have still been only getting down to 10 or 12 degrees. Well, anyway, she had the top of the box off and she was gone, and she didn't turn back up for 6 months. And when she did, she was in a seriously bad mood, and she was also about a foot longer than she was when she left, so she'd obviously been having a good time with food when she went. So just make sure that they're secure when you set up the hibernaculum. I hope that's been of use. Big thank you to Ashley, who's helped me handle the snakes and make sure that they're okay. He's been becoming more and more of a vital more and more of a vital member of our team. This is Paul's son. We're both very proud of the way that he's took on the job, so make sure you say hello to him in the comments. And we'll be back soon with another video. I'm not sure what on yet, but you know, as always, we'll try and make sure it's as information packed as possible. There's 2 bits that I've not used. We have got an albino variant of northern pine, which is on the market. This is actually a bull snake, but what it's showing you is the defensive posture. So when it's really kicking off, they S up and make themselves big, they gape, the tongue just loosely falls out of their mouth, and that rudimentary glottis really kicks in, and they can make a real noise. The other thing we've got as well is I used the forest usage for the region, and predominantly it is lobolly shortleaf pine, and we've got bits of oak and hickory through there as well, and oak and gum and cypress, and then mixed oak and pine forest as well. So you know, we're talking about predominantly 50 to 80% pine as the predominant species of tree where the pine snake lives. We'll see you again soon from all of us